It's Monday and time for the Back to Business podcast, featuring Calgary's industry leaders. Welcome today's show host, Kim Hayden.
Our guest today is truly a legacy in the making. You may know him from football. You may know him from being a community leader. You may know him from being your RBC connection. But Jon Cornish is such an amazing human being and truly a person that we can all learn from. But first, our land acknowledgement.
In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Ga'aina, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the E'ahe Nakota Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Welcome to the show, Jon. Super excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I am, blown away, honestly. Our young professionals go up to 35 here, and you're not much older, and yet you seem to have an incredibly accomplished path. I'm not even going to say career because you have so many different variances within there. But I would love to start first with a little bit of background as to who is Jon?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was told early in my time in life, when I'm in college, I set some records. I had a good relationship with my chancellor at the university. And he said, life isn't about what you do for yourself, Jon. It's about what you do for others. And so, you have your chancellor of the university, who I only had this relationship with because I was, setting records. When he said that, it sort of clicked in me that, maybe I should be focused on doing work for others. I started volunteering at the Habitat for Humanity while I was in Kansas, which led to some of the most rewarding experiences of my life, where you have somebody walk into their new home. They've never owned a home before, and this is theirs. Those kinds of experiences, I don't know if I'll ever equal. And so that stayed with me. I tried to keep giving back my time, building up my own career, so I was in a place where I could help others. That's sort of a summary of what I'm trying to do.
And you started doing that back during your career as a football player at KU, correct?
That's
okay.
Right. That's right.
So that would be term servant leadership. Like, we see a lot of people talking servant leadership today, but we're going back to the early 2000s. So
when you put in that perspective, I had my own mom as my sort of reference point. My mom was a priest, right? But she wasn't always a priest. She originally was an entrepreneur. She had her own music practice where she was teaching music students. She was working at 2 different churches as their music directors. So she was figuring out a way to make it work, and seeing how she led, how much compassion that she had, how much willingness that she would show up someplace. I thought that was a good baseline for how I should lead. Now, I came across a sci-fi book that put it in a different way. Servant leadership, to me, is the idea of the hindmost, the one who leads from behind, the one doing the work, and hopefully that inspires others to do the same.
That's that from behind. Like, we see that like in wolf packs. So we see down in the States, there's different programs for returning veterans, young veterans, that will actually go out and walk with wolf packs, right? And they actually learn from the structure within that. I love that. I totally get everything you're saying. I've always been into community service. But there's a big difference between community service of volunteering with a community association, like what I had always done, and you creating the associations. So what I want to do is go through a little bit so people understand more so how you got your start with your football career. But I want to quickly move into this is the game changer. You are the game changer now, right? And it has nothing to do with carrying a football. But let's start with your career, and then I want to move into Black Chambers and how you got that going. How's that sound?
Yeah, that's cool. Before we started recording, we talked about sort of 8 to 14 being formative time, when I was in my grade 8 year at St. Thomas More, my high school, I came home after an awards ceremony with the trophy of each team that I was on. I was on 4 teams that year, and I won the MVP for each team. I think that sort of set some expectations in terms of my potential achievements as an athlete early on. And that was all sort of nice to haves, because just a few years before that, I had seen Donovan Bailey win Canada's Most Outstanding Athlete, the Lou Marsh Trophy, now the Northern Star Trophy. And for me, because I was following Mario Lemieux, Wayne Gretzky, I'd seen those guys win, but they didn't quite look like me. Seeing Donovan Bailey win it, I was like, oh, maybe this is something I could do. And so in grade 8, winning those trophies was like, okay, maybe I'm on to something here. And my mom always stressed the academics and made sure that I did those. But then, following through football, track, all of a sudden, I'm in, number 1 or number 2 in all these different things. And at the end of my high school career, leads to a scholarship. Of course, that scholarship involved me sending out 100 VHS tapes to different universities. There's no links to YouTube. This is before DVDs. VHS tape. And I was lucky enough, and this is within the last year, I encountered the person that worked the UPS store. And she was like, John, how did your football career go? And I was like, it's funny you asked, right? Because I sent all this stuff out, got a bunch of scholarship offers, but I ended up choosing Kansas because that's where I had family from my grandpa's side, my mom's grandpa. So spent my time there. Originally, it wasn't so clear that I was going to be the starting running back. So I started pursuing other things. I was a student senator. I was a vice president of my housing. I was actually the chairperson of the homecoming committee for all of student housing. So it was interesting to get involved in all those things. And then sort of the football time, started picking up, and then I ended up winning the team MVP twice. And I set records I still hold at Kansas today, which led to a draft pick by the Calgary Stampeders. I did go to the NFL Combine. By then, sort of some other factors had gotten involved. Am I going to be the guy that can be Canada's best athlete as a backup in the NFL? Nah, I didn't know that. So I tested the waters in the CFL, and I guess the rest is, as they say, history.
Oh, you had good company. I mean, it worked out well for The Rock. So, it's the CFL. And I was saying, you know what? And if you're listening to this, NFL, nice and everything. But man, CFL, Canadian football moves. It's twice as fast. I was joking with Jackson. I said, I think that the American football is more designed so that there's more intermissions to buy hot dogs and beer. But the Canadian football is just those guys are lean and running. They move fast. I love going here and just seeing all even the tailgate parties and the excitement, and the fact that as an athlete, you get to be part of all these people's lives, so you don't even realize, and part of their tradition, right? That's what's really cool.
It's something I wasn't so aware of until after I retired. I was lucky enough that the Flames were like, let's keep John around, and they created a role for me as a game day ambassador. And then all of a sudden I was still part of the team after I retired. So I actually take great offense when somebody says former Calgary Stampeder. It's like, I never left the payroll. I've been around since I retired at every single home game. So it's been it's truly incredible to see the love and the passion that the fans have, and to be able to now tailgate with them, celebrate during the game with them, and now thanks to the Red and White Club being renamed Stamps House after the game, get to party with them after the games as well.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about your education and what you're doing as a profession today, because it just seems like your profession, you have all these different facets to your life. And let's talk about your profession, and then how you're able to leverage, because we're talking money, and we know that getting business revenue, we know what the statistics are between women's startups, persons, from, Indigenous or new Canadian. We know that there's all these things, but you're with RBC. So walk me through what you do with RBC and what are some of the things that you're working internally to make those opportunities better.
Yeah. So before I ever had football, before I ever had sports, I had an idea. I was walking past a bank with my mom, and I saw a gentleman in there, well-dressed, shaking hands with somebody else, and they both seemed really happy. And I was like, you know what? You can help people with money. I didn't know what the job was called, but it was 6 years old. I decided, I want to help people with money. Nobody ever helped my mom with money. I want to help others with money. And so I ended up, thinking, psychology, I'm going to be working with people. I want to know how they think. All right, so I get my psychology degree in university. And then sort of as I become the starter on the football team, I'm like, okay, let's start thinking about the next step. I was always thinking about what next. I get introduced to one person who introduced me to another, eventually to Jim Davidson, who was at First Energy. And Jim brings me into the office, spends about 90 minutes with me, brings in multiple of his compatriots. And by the end of it, we have a plan to get me from football player to investment advisor. I execute upon that plan and end up finishing level 1 of the Chartered Financial Analyst designation before I retired from football. I had 3 years in the bank branch at that time. And so what it resulted in is me getting a job offer before retiring, which made me retire. So it was interesting. A lot of people don't know that. He got injured. No, I had a job offer. I had been preparing for this point. And honestly, I'm not sure how far you can go with your career after you win Canada's top athlete and then win the Grey Cup as the reigning Canada top athlete. It's hard to top that, I thought.
It's kind of good it's a good policy to stop while you're at the top.
Yeah,
right?
Nobody ever does.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a good place to call it. Go into the bank, and it was a little bit disoriented because I'd worn suits before, but I'd never worked in a suit before. I was 40 pounds heavier than I was now, and they didn't have my logins transferred over quite yet. So I had nothing to do on my first day. They tell me, hey, John, go unstaple these pieces of paper. And I'd stapled plenty of things in my life, but I'd never unstapled anything. So I was learning how to do that, struggling, starting to sweat a little bit. Did I retire too soon? Why did I do this? Should I go back? And then this person walks past. I was like, oh, what? Wow, she looks nice. And it turns out that person was my future wife. So then after that, I was like, yeah, I guess it won't be so bad sticking around here. So I had 3 years of experience managing wealth at TD Private Investment Council. I was really happy with that time. Very supportive atmosphere, and managing that much money. You learn the ins and outs of managing money. And then I thought, okay, maybe it's time for me to go off on my own. End up at Cumberland Private Wealth, and it's a small family office. And then I really got to understand the thought process of what I would consider high net worth individuals. And then RBC came a knocking after that due to a very interesting set of circumstances. I completed the Chartered Financial Analyst designation program, 4 years of investment experience and finishing all the tests. Some say the tests are some of the hardest tests in existence.
Hardest test out there, yes.
So that's all done. But then I get to the CFL Hall of Fame, the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, on the first ballot, and it blasts out that I had the CFA. So then RBC comes a knocking. So I was only at Cumberland for about 8 months, and now I've been running my practice with RBC. I'm going into my 5th year of that practice.
Wow. What is that saying in Spider-Man? With great talent comes great responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility.
And that's literally what is rolling through my head as you're speaking. And it's almost like this power has been within you from a small child. And in the fact that you are creating knowledge and insight into finances in a time where a lot of people are dealing with food scarcity and housing scarcity and financial scarcity. But it comes from seeing your mother and ensuring that nobody's mother is left behind. And I get this feeling that everything you do is related back to nobody gets left behind. I watched your interview on CBC this morning, and I love the initiative that you have launched with being the chancellor at U of C around the food scarcity challenges for our students, because we all know, I think, was it Virginia Woolf that said, if you are not, you cannot live well, love well, unless you're fed well, or something along those lines. And I still want to keep getting back to, there's so much here. I want to get back to Black Chambers because I know that they're hosted out of the CPC, the Cal Peak Club, and you have a partnership that you've been able to kind of work in that space and do everything. But I did watch the CBC thing and food. Does food relate back to your childhood, to your mother? Like, why is food for students important to you?
You know, as much as money was tight, food was never really, you know, it was the 80s. You know, my mom was able to somehow raise us in the nicest part of New Westminster, Queen's Park area, which is now one of the nicest parts of Canada. Like it was, she did it. She had that tenacity and that grit. And I don't think we ever, like, you know, we didn't have the best food, but we were always fed. And then sort of to see sort of how my diet's changed. I intermittent fast. Food isn't part of my life in the daily measure at all. Like, I have a very different relationship with food. But to see other people not be able to have a normalized relationship with food, in that they don't know when they might eat, I pick up on that. And so it's actually funny. I've had a number of students meet me here at the Calgary Petroleum Club, and I do that specifically for a reason. You know, I make myself available, but they have to come downtown and show up, right? Cool. That's the give and take. But if they show up here, I'll buy them a meal. And that's because, you know, that level of food security, what am I going to eat today? That shouldn't be a question for our students. They should be, you know, how am I going to pass this test? You know, like, you know, what's my career going to look like? Those are pertinent questions for a student. I don't think food should be a pertinent question for a student. I was privileged in my time at University of Kansas. We had our training table, and so basically every meal was covered. It was never and so for me to think that you aren't getting enough food, okay, we have to do something about this. And so last year we had a food challenge, Senate versus the U Calgary alumni, to raise money and food for the student food bank. This year I was like, no, let's put some structure to this. We had to GoFundMe as the place we raised the money. So now we have an official University of Calgary endowment fund hosted donation like avenue, so that people can help address this concern. People are like, oh, why students, you should be working stuff. We had tuitions going up. We have rents skyrocketing, right? These things that used to be pretty straightforward with first student are no longer, and something has to give. Food seems like a place that gives, so let's try to rectify that.
I 110% agree on ensuring that our future young professionals, so they have to get there, right? And yeah, that's I like I said, you were like an onion, and I just kept peeling back, and there's so much more. So, am I understanding correctly that you were part of founding the Black Chambers here in Calgary?
I started it. Yeah.
You did start it.
Yeah,
okay.
I started the
You
Calgary
started
Chambers,
it.
yeah.
Now, in bringing it to the Calgary Petroleum Club, why this location? What was it? Because you also just mentioned bringing students down here. What is it about having association to a space, a historic space like this, that is important?
So let's go back to the people that nominated me to become a member. Ken King and Grant Bartlett, right? So Grant Bartlett, you know, one of the heroes of Calgary, I guess, you know, 30 plus companies started, you know, hundreds more supported. And then Ken King, the great Ken King from the president of the Calgary Flames. Seeing them gave me a leg up here, right? You know, John, you know, the best tip I'll give to anybody that's thinking about becoming a member, there's certain chairs in this building that have a special precedence over the others. And it's because from there, you can see anybody that comes and goes from the club, allowing you the opportunity to give your waves, acknowledgments, and importantly, building that network out. They taught me something simple like that. They brought me into the P Club, gave me an opportunity to be part of something like this, the history and sort of the vibrancy that this club has. And then in giving other people the opportunity to join the club or introduce them to the club, I'm just thinking about paying it forward. So when it comes to the Calgary Black Chambers, my wife, like I said, we were volunteering everywhere. She wanted to just do our own thing. And so that involved us looking for some data, and we identified that it was pretty dire straits to be a Black person in Calgary. So let's address this. So I ended up just running up to well-dressed Black people on the street and managed to convince them to show up. We had 55 people in the Petroleum Club down in the Renfrew Lounge. And we just shared our stories about what it was being Black in Calgary. And that provided sort of something to build a group around. Second meeting, we elected our first person from the outside. That was Chi Ilya Ndul, who is now the current president. And then after that, we set values. After that, we got our first real board going. And so that board is the group that we call the co-founders of the group. So we went from not really having any Black group at all to having sort of us be registered and official by 2020. But importantly, there was a few key pieces. I took my experience from my volunteering with the Calgary Foundation, which I still do, to understand that's where we should put our money. So it's all charitable donations right off the bat. And then importantly, I thought mentorship was a big piece because I had so much support. I developed my own mentorship course off of some materials based on the internet, and we ended up receiving the Friends of Education Award for that mentorship course. We had 50, then 300 kids the next year go through the course. And then we tried on the best effort basis to pair these students with mentors as well. So that was really good. We got the Calgary Black Achievement Awards, of which we did the first one from my basement, and we did the second one here. We had 320 people. We had absolute capacity in the McMurray room, and it was an incredible event to have that many people together. Now it's big enough that it's being hosted at the TELUS Convention Center. So I thought it was nice to see how that went. But I think it was really predicated off of my understanding that, how to put pieces in place. And then media releases, I was certainly beneficial to, have my football background when we started this up. We had 3 front pages in the first 6 months of our existence, right? It was really supportive of the community news and stuff to do all that. And now that it's been rolling, once I became Chancellor, I had to step back from any official duties related to it. But now that it still hosts its event, second Thursday of the month, same night as the members' social here.
Yeah.
It's
I know. I see Chuck's. Chuck's he's been on the show also. Yeah. He's amazing. Yeah. And so he has similar kind of footsteps that you have in the sense of when you're looking at. He's in real estate, but he's in the financial space. His father's in the legal space. He's done football. He's from the States. He's done it's just a really interesting to see truly brilliant people, and you watch the different ages, right? So you're not there yet, but you're nearing 40, correct? So, and then we've got our young professionals, which are all kind of under that 32 that are in. And I love watching, you're absolutely right, the chairs, sitting in the chairs and watching the people come and go and seeing, our 60 and 70-year-olds, right? And then seeing our 25-year-olds that are they're eager. And I love that.
Just to touch on that a little bit, I became a member of the club as a young professional. And honestly, within those first few months, just seeing the different people that come through now, rubbing shoulders with Stephen Harper. So, hey, Steve, how's it going? Or, former premiers here, current premiers, leaders of universities, leaders of businesses. You start to sort of pick up on a few things. These guys weren't acting like all this. And it allows you to be part of the business culture, even if you're just new to it. And I would say that one thing I've seen in basically the 10 years I've been a member of the club is just, it used to be that the old boys club.
Yep.
And it's just changed so much now. You see just women getting together at the club, colored folk getting together club. everybody. It's now an inclusive, diverse space, and it never was before.
Well, and the members mixers, there's a real even kind of mix between entrepreneurial, because for a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, they don't tend to have the same level of education as people who are coming from corporate. However, they have an entirely different set of skills that are, they just, when we're looking at technologies and what's going on, kind of in the global market, right? So they're not as singularly focused as an individual who's in a corporate space. But it's really cool to see the conversation, because in this world that we're in now, we have to be omnipresent. We have to be aware of what's going on the other side. And I'm seeing that happen here at the Cal Peak Club. So, we, like I said, we could have a 2-hour conversation and still not touch everything. And you're only halfway through. This is what's crazy, is you're only halfway through. Halfway
through what?
Life.
No,
you're not even halfway.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
You
still have, this is only half of what you're going to accomplish.
But no. A lot of people have problems with scale.
Okay.
Right? No,
you're scaling, eh?
No. Just in terms of ages, right? The person that lives to 200 has probably already been born at this point. Right?
Gen Alpha, yes.
And so when we think about like longer term life scales, we're in a place where technology is advancing at an ever increasing rate, right? We probably have the rudiments of getting rid of dementia, probably pieces of getting rid of cancer, right? And then heart health is a difficult one because very often it's predicated on somebody's own lifestyle, but we've seen a sort of a healthy sort of approach come to life. People are trying to be more healthy. People losing weight. I think the average age is going to start ticking up here over the next 10 years. And then past that, just ever increasing returns on the technology, increasing lifestyle.
I've been tracking we had Dr. Kapoor on here, and he was talking about how the science is there for, organ replacement with your own organs. And there's so much going on. And, but no, I guess where I was going at was, you have reached so many lives. You've inspired so many people without even being within the same, geographical space with them. You've inspired. And as we mentioned, between the ages of 8 and 14, there's this huge impact on people's lives. And so some child has probably watched you, and you've literally changed the trajectory of their life. But you're not sitting still. That's where I was going at. It's like, if you've accomplished this much at such a young age, like what is the future hold?
It's an interesting question, because I'm more concrete on this than I ever was. What does the future hold? Not much is actually. It's a weird response, right? I'm very happy in my role at RBC. I'm thinking that we're doing incredible things for our clients. So what more can be asked of me? And I think my wife put it succinctly as like, I want to live my life, man. Yeah. Like we did the all this volunteering. When I retired from football, my goal was to say yes to everything. And I succeeded in doing that for a number of years. Hence my wife saying, let's just do one thing. That became the Calgary Black Chambers. And then that gave me a platform to be considered for the Chancellor role at the University of Calgary. Cool. But that's almost our entire relationship that we've been giving our time. And I think there's so much value in that. But at the same time, I also understand that, I'm a professional, right? There's starting to be a sort of preponderance of cash generated by my business. So I'm starting to think about how I can deploy that sort of from a foundational standpoint. I know there's 2 big pieces I want to make sure that are funded. I have, we're just about to get it across the finish line, the Cornish Scholars at the University of Calgary. So this would be a prestige scholarship, similar to the Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford, in that top students are receiving capital to be, here at the university, and this would be actually just targeted at Black students. Right.
Amazing.
So, like the goal ultimately of the Calgary Black Chamber is to make Calgary the best place to live and work for Black people. I think this would be a piece of that puzzle. So, funding that up, and then obviously there's this trophy that we haven't talked about.
Yes.
The so-called Jon Cornish trophy. It's housed at my main contribution to it was getting it housed at the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. I would like to ensure that Canadian football is forever remembered, and so I'll probably be trying to endow a portion of my assets to there.
Wow. From serving Habitat Humanity while you were doing your studies, while you were doing, performing at absolute peak levels, to, all that you are establishing. It's challenging enough just to volunteer, but to lead the charge. And, Calgary's blessed to have you.
Oh.
But let me ask you this. So I'm going to ask you two questions. We're going to wrap this up. One is, what do you think is the Calgary advantage? Because there's a lot of cool stuff happening here.
And there's cool stuff happening because we have an entrepreneurial mindset. That's why I started the chambers, right? Like, why don't we just do something that's targeted? Why don't we just create something ourselves? I think that's the Calgary advantage. When you have people out there that aren't just sitting back, what job should I have? What job do I want? Right? It's a very different mindset. And I think, there's still, a decent part of the poor population. They're just, I just want to show up at work and go home. Right? But that's not me. And it's not these entrepreneurs here in town. It's not my clients. We have people in this city that are just willing to I'm going to take some risk so I can do something special. And I think that's the whole idea of it. Maybe we have good social support. Maybe have parents with capital that I had a football career that allowed me to explore different avenues. I think if anything, we have to really lean in on this. Really lean in on the idea that we're providing enough support so people can follow their dreams, and not just saying their jobs. Create new things, and I definitely feel like we have everything in place, especially at the university, to really support that vision.
In closing this, and like I said, you are only a few years past where our young professionals age range, and yet we have our new young professionals program here at Cal Peak Club, and the goal is to really create this space that's safe to learn from, people who have already excelled within a certain space, and to ask questions, because mentorship is critical to success. What are 3 things, I'm totally putting you on the spot, if you could give 3 pieces of advice to the young professionals, especially in today's world where everything is moving at light speed, opportunities are opening up left, right, and center, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give young professionals?
So I will be speaking with the young professionals I think in June. So I don't want to front run myself. So what am I going to say outside of that? Okay, so we'll have 3 things. 1, eliminate expectations, right? If you are on the right path, great. Thinking that your path will result in all these outcomes and stuff. Why are you on the path? Is it for those outcomes, or is it because of the journey? And I think that's what people have to understand. Life is a journey. Your goal may change. You might have a business that's going to be, trying to create pencils that are, revolutionary. But then all of a sudden, through that process, you come up with, these erasers that we actually made are revolutionary, right? Proceed down your path. Just don't have any expectations about the outcome, right? Allowing you that openness to pivot. On the second one, I would say, as we've talked about, talk to your mentors. Have a diverse set of mentors. Get mentors outside of your line of business, outside your normal crew that you would hang out with. Diversity of opinion is so valuable. It's shown returns in the stock market, and it shows return on life. So I have a lot of different mentors, a lot of different things. I'd recommend everybody do the same. And then sort of on the third one, I would say when it comes to, and this is going to be a little bit interesting one, my clients have dealt with it. I have lots of buddies who have dealt with it. When it comes to a financial decision, there's no greater financial decision you'll make in your life other than your spouse, right? Your spouse is the greatest financial decision you'll ever make. I think being on the same page with your spouse is so valuable, so important, that whoever that person is, whether you're single and you're going on your own or with somebody, you got to be on the same page. And that means, having those difficult discussions. The goal, I think, for me in life was to find a life partner. I found that, and we've been together a decade. Not everybody will have luck in finding that, but I think if you're open and you're willing to express what you want to do in life, really talk about your goals and finding somebody that matches up with, there's few things more rewarding than that. So, if you find a spouse, just understand how important that decision is.
Don't be afraid to learn how to unstaple things, because you never know who you'll run into.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm just going to add one more thing that I think is beyond evident with who you are, is always look for opportunity to also volunteer, be involved. We don't have enough volunteers out there. And it's such an excellent opportunity to find those mentors and find those people. And speaking of volunteering, Jon, you're going to be speaking here for the Young Professionals program. So if you're a young professional out there, reach out to the club. It's not out of reach. It's not out of reach. I can promise you the club here has got open arms. They are so welcoming, and they want to see our next generation succeed. Absolutely. Jon, I can't thank you enough for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today on the Back to Business podcast. Be sure to visit calpeteclub.com, CALPETECLUB.com, to find out more about upcoming events, networking opportunities, and membership. If you are not already a valued member at the CPC, where we are proudly connecting and supporting Calgary's business leaders.